welcome to part 2 of this build. So in part 1 I did, well, everything here, put all the electronics together, built the frame, put the motors on, and cabled it all up. So part 2 we're going to test it, and then we're going to program it, and then we're going to give it its maiden flight. All I've done since part 1 is added this antenna. This is one of the antennas that comes with the VTX, and the reason for that is you never want to power up a VTX without an antenna on because you'll damage it. This is only going to be temporary. I'm going to use the one with the SMA connector in the actual build. So this is the moment of truth. This is where we test it. So I've just got a big 3-cell battery here, and I'm going to test it with that. I prefer to test with 3-cell for some reason. I'm just mad like that. So hopefully this works. Yeah, that seemed to be pretty good. So you can see the video transmitter's got power. The flight controller's obviously got power. You heard the ESCs, so those work. What I'm going to do is grab my goggles, and I'm just going to hit record on those. So if I quickly test with these. Alright, so the video, whoop, it's in my mouth. Video is working fine. The OSD looks horrible. This is just the default Betaflight OSD. Whatever was on the board to start with, I'll probably want to fix that. Alright, so yeah, I guess we take the power out now and then move it over to the computer. Alright, so we're about a week later at the moment. I've already recorded this once and somehow managed to lose the footage, so I'm going to be re-recording this. So some of the steps I'm going to skip over. I'll mention them, but you probably won't see me do them because I've already done them. So the first thing I normally do when I get to this stage is to update the flight controller and the ESCs, and I'll do them in that order. So what we're going to do is flash the flight controller. Now this is an F3. And I found the easiest way to flash these is to put them into bootloader mode. So to do this, press this little, on this flight controller, this little button here. The button next to it is the bind button, because this has got the built-in receiver. So you hold the button down, plug in your USB, and that should do what it's doing there. So normally there's a blue light that comes on here. That hasn't come on because it's in bootloader mode. On the laptop itself, if we open up Betaflight, you'll notice it says DFU. So we don't want to connect. What we want to do is go into the firmware flasher. So wait for it to load firmware. So I've already got FreeSky F3 selected. That's the board type, and what we're going to do is flash 3.2.2. Now I want to have it set to no reboot. Actually, I'll get it to load the firmware while we're doing this. I'll have it set to no reboot and a full chip erase. We're already connected. I don't generally need to set the manual baud rate. So yeah, you hit the load firmware and it downloads the firmware. Read all the stuff there about the updates or whatever, but this is the important bit, what I want. So I go flash firmware, and it erases the flight controller, and then it will flash it. Alright, so that's successfully flashed the flight controller and rebooted it. And now you'll notice on the flight controller, because it's restarted without me pressing the button, I'm now getting that blue light flashing. So on Betaflight, we go back into the welcome tab. Just, I don't know why, hit the connect button. It should connect me in. Takes a little bit of time, and we're in. So this was a brand new flash, and one thing I've noticed with this receiver is, last time it kept all of this. Oh no, it has. Okay, cool. So you've got the serial RX set to UART2, the smart port set to UART3. Now this erased the memory, so that's actually baked into this firmware, which is great. That means I don't need to remember which ports are which. So yeah, what I'll do is I don't actually need to set any of this up at the moment. That's just updating the firmware. So what we'll do now is move on to BL Heli. So I've got the latest version here. You just need to load that up. Takes a bit on this computer. Get rid of, oops. Using a trackpad because it's my laptop. Alright, and so this is BL Heli. Now to actually get BL Heli to work, we need to connect the ESCs to power because currently they're not being powered. So I need to plug in the battery. Now I've already tested this as you saw before. So I know that will work. And this is the reason why we've got the antenna on. So that's connected. We want COM4, that was my dog. And we hit connect. And so that's connected it up. When we hit check, it will check the ESCs, tell me what they are, and should, yeah, drop me into the BL Heli S interface. So this is a much more cut down interface than normal BL Heli because there's not as much you need to set. Now, normally what I would do now is update the ESCs. The first thing I might as well do is put the new version of the firmware on the ESCs. These were running 16.6, I think, when I got them, and clearly I've already updated them. But how you would do that is leave all 4 of them ticked, so there's all 4 ESCs there. You hit Flash BL Heli, it will, assuming I actually clicked the button, yep, it'll go away and find for me the correct firmware. The beauty about BL Heli S is it already gives you the correct firmware. It reads this off of the ESC itself, so you don't need to go and find anything. You select that, you hit OK, and then it takes you through the process of flashing all 4 of the ESCs. It confirms they're all the correct ones. They're all the same because it's a 4-in-1. And it goes through and it will flash the new version of BL Heli to all 4 of them, and then it will drop you back into this interface. So what we want to do after we flash them is actually set the motor directions. So if you go into the motors tab, it resets the ESCs, and you tick this box, understand that I'm about to speed up the motors and I remove the props. Now I never put the props on these, so tick that box. This lets us speed the motors up. So what we want to do is we want to slowly nudge this up until they're just all spinning. So that'll do. And now that they're spinning, we can see the direction that they're in. So I want to set these reverse direction. I have a video of me doing that on another quad, which I'll link. But I'm going to be doing that on all my quads from now on. So what I want to do is, well, first off I need to work out which one's motor 1. So it'll be 1 would be this one over here. It's difficult because it's backwards. So motor 1 I want turning that way. Normally the props would spin inwards like this, that way around, but because I want to reverse my props, they'll be spinning outwards like that. So if I just gently touch the top of the motor, I'll try and do it where you can see it, like that, you can actually feel it flicking against your finger, and this is turning that way. So if I was running normal rotation, these would be fine, but I want to reverse that. So I want to reverse 1, this is 2, and again, that's the normal rotation. I want to do reverse rotation. So that's spinning that way, so it's going correct for normal, whoops, going correct for normal rotation. So I want to reverse 2. 3, I want that way, going out. 3 is already going in the correct direction. And 4 I want coming this way. 4 is going that way as well, so I want to reverse 4. So I want to reverse 1, 2, and 4. So we want to stop that. Move back into here, and we need to reconnect and check. Alright, so what we want to do is 1, we want to reverse, okay, So deselect 1. So this is now seeing 2. We want to reverse. Okay, deselect 2. So the blue one is obviously the one that it's currently showing the settings for. So 3 was normal rotation. We don't want to reverse that. And 4 we did want to reverse. So we want to write that setup. And if we highlight all of them again and hit check, and it tells us their current config, so these are all in sync, otherwise it would tell us they're not in sync. But it tells me that this one's got a different direction. ESC3 has a different direction to the master, which is a normal direction because the master is always the first ESC, which would be 1 in this case. Okay, cool. So if we go back into the motor tab, tick the box again, speed them back up, and now I just double check them. So that one is spinning that way, this one should be correct here, that one was spinning that way anyway, this one should be spinning that way, and it is, and this one is spinning that way as well. Okay, so that's set all the motor directions correctly. The only other thing I normally do in here is when I hit connect, I normally set the max ppm to 2000 and the min ppm to around there, 1012. This gives a wider range for the flight controller if you're using one of the ppm based protocols. So that would be either ppm itself or one shot, either of the one shots or multi-shot. They're all basically based on ppm, so these numbers matter for that. If you're using D-shot, these don't matter so much, so it's not a big deal. Okay, so that's the ESC set. Again, we want to make sure these are all correct. The motor timing might be wrong for these motors, but I won't know until I've flown it. And that's about it. I generally leave everything else set to default, so there's no real reason for me to change most of it. So we want to disconnect out of that. And I'll close BL Heli, and it actually didn't crash. It normally crashes when I close it. And back into Betaflight. So I'm going to leave the battery connected. And the reason for that is I'm going to set my minimum point in here. Oh, I've noticed sometimes mine does this. I need to hit connect a second time before it will actually work. There we go. Alright, so if we go down to the motors tab, well, first off we need to go into the configuration tab. So there's a few things I need to check in here. This is set to one shot 125. So with these ESCs, I can easily run multi-shot, which will be good, and I think I can run D-shot 600. If you load D-shot 600, you notice you get virtually no settings. D-shot handles all of this itself. So I'm going to be running D-shot on this quad, but I'll show you the process for multi-shot anyway, or any of the PPM setups anyway. So you've got 3 options here. You've got minimum throttle, maximum throttle, and minimum command. So minimum command and maximum throttle set your ppm range as such. So you want to have these set to 1000 and 2000. You want the upper number to equal the upper number that you set in BL Heli, which is why I set it to 2000. You want this range to try and be as big as possible. Now minimum throttle is the bit that you need to tune. So what you need to do is go into your motor tab. Again, don't have your props connected, and hit OK. And we need to step up the master throttle. What you're looking for, and I think on this quad, whoops, it's going to be about there, is you need a number where all the motors are turning, and when you just give them a slight grip like this, they don't stall. So none of those stalled there. and you want to try and go as low as you can on that. And that so what this is the lowest number that your flight controller will ever send once your motors are armed. Obviously 0 being to stop them spinning, or 1000 in this case being to stop them spinning. So what I would normally do is set this to that number that we've just discovered, hit save and reboot. And then that will tell it, once you've armed the motors and you want them spinning, that's the minimum throttle to spin them at. And you want them so that they don't stop when you grip them, because you've got to account for the weight of the prop as well. There's going to be a little bit of weight, but you just need to gently tap them. You don't need to grab them, they'll stop when you do that. You just need to sort of gently put your fingers on and give them some resistance. But again, like I said, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be running these on D-shot. So I'm going to pick 600 because it's probably as good as I'm going to need. And the other thing I need to do is set my receiver. So this was, where is it? Oh, it's already set to S-bus. That's good, I don't need to do that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is change my PID loops to 2K. Not going to bother with the gyro, I don't have anything else. I'll hit save and reboot there. Alright, so I'm not going to need the battery connected for the rest of this now, because I don't need the ESC, so I'm going to turn that off, take that out, and that'll stop it doing anything stupid. So the only real other thing I need to do is make sure the radio is set up. So again, I've already bound this in the flight controller review, but what I'm going to do is just check and make sure it is bound. So if you go into the receivers tab, whoa, I don't want all of that. What are you doing, laptop? Okay, so alright, as you can see, the throttle is set. So I'm knocking the throttle, I'll show it over here, knocking the throttle up and down. The yaw is set, the pitch and roll. I've also set this switch here as my arm, so that should be aux1, yep. And that's it, I don't generally set any other switches. So the other thing is this flight controller uses auxiliary 4 as the RSSI, and that's already set. So that's all set up, I don't need to do anything there. So I do need to set an arm switch, so we go into modes, and for arm we want to add a range, and because it's currently bound, you can see underneath this, I'm using aux1 because that's my only switch I've set up, you can see where the switch is. So that's it in the down position, and that's it up there in the up position. So all I need to do is change this slider so that it's over the up position and hit save. So that's saved. One of the things I normally do as well for these is I try and avoid having that range go over the 1500, because if you turn the quad on and it's not bound, auxiliary channels can default to 1500. So I just set that higher and where the switch is. So as you can see, when I go into arm comes on, the quad is now armed, but there's no battery, so it doesn't make any difference. And then we're off. So that's the only thing I normally set there. PID tuning, so if I can get into that. Alright, the only real thing, because I've never flown this quad before, I don't know how it's going to react, so the only thing I'm going to do is set my normal rates. I can't remember them right now. I think I normally turn the RC rate down. Oh. I think it's 92, and then the super rate goes up. I think that's about where I normally have mine. I've written them down, but obviously don't have the bit of paper with, oh jeez, don't have the bit of paper with me right now. It is really hard to use this mouse. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set them here. Now I'm just putting them to a sort of semi-sane figure that I normally use. What I can do is actually change these in the field. I've got the Lua script set up on this, so we should be able to edit these in the field without any issues. So yeah, the only other thing I need to set up is actually the video transmitter. Remember, this is a smart video transmitter, so I can set this up in the ports so that the flight controller can talk to it. And you do this under peripherals, and I believe I set this one up as TBS Smart Audio. We'll hit save and reboot. If it doesn't work, I can always change it. And we'll hit connect. And the other thing I need to set up is the OSD. So again, I'm not used to having an OSD. So go into OSD when it loads everything, and everything is turned on by default. So I think I need to go through and change just about everything so that it's off. Wow, there's a lot. Alright, so this is the last thing I'm going to be doing on this anyway, so what I'm going to do is just go through and finish unticking all of these boxes. And then we'll come back and finish off the quad.
Okay, so sometimes it's worth reading the manual before you start. What I've discovered is that firstly the VTX runs on the tramp protocol, so it's not the TBS Smart Audio, it's the IRC tramp protocol. And the second thing I've discovered is the correct cabling for this video transmitter is one cable, not two, and it goes transmit to transmit. This doesn't make much sense to me, which is why I had it cabled up the other way, but we'll just go with it. It wasn't working. I'm sorry, I'm probably getting my head in the way. Whoops. This is extremely difficult, but this is where in the build, when I said I was going to 400 is a bit high, when I said I was going to set these so you could pull them apart to work on, this is turned out to be quite handy. I've got the shapes. So what I will do is finish trying to put this in. It's very difficult to do it anyway, let alone on camera. And we'll give it another test and check that it works. Alright, so that worked great. I can now control the VTX via the controller through that Lua script. So this leaves me with one last problem. This antenna was only ever supposed to be temporary. These are little linear antennas. They're perfectly fine for if you're flying indoors or not very far, or you're not getting a huge amount of interference. They're great, but yeah, this is not going to be flying indoors. I don't need the weight reduction of not having a full-sized antenna. So I was going to swap it out and use this. This one has an SMA connector on the end, so I can use an antenna of my choice. I was going to use either one of these, which is one of the TBS antennas, or one of these, which is the Luminaire Maxis. I might end up doing a review on one of these one day as well, because these are pretty cool. So yeah, so the only problem is this is the top plate So that sits on like that. And somehow I need to mount this so that I can screw an antenna, i.e. something like this, onto it. There's no antenna holder at the back. There's no holes or anything that it fits in nicely on the top. As you can see, it just slides in and out of the main one. It doesn't even fit through the two little side ones. I can't mount anything there. I guess I could cable tie something there and just have it flopping around there, but the chances of it ending up in a proper are pretty high, so I'm not going to be doing that. So what I've decided to do is just 3D print something. So with the magic of editing, and because I've already actually done this, I'll show you the build of that. And so this is what I've ended up with after that's printed. How this sits is that feeds through that main hole there, and then it just lines up with the screw holes there. So the screws keeping the top plate onto these posts here also holds this in place. And it's at, let's call that 45 degrees. I can't actually remember the exact number, but what that means is that the antenna will be sticking out backwards like that. This will keep it well out of the way of the props. It also means when the quad's going forward, it sort of sticks up a bit in the air a bit more. And then yeah, that should work out real well. So the only thing left for me to do now is connect that end to the video transmitter. So I'm going to need to do this. Well, I don't need to do this while it's all connected. I can always unscrew it and just push it back out. But what I'm going to do is just knock that off. I basically don't want that happening during flight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect that to the bottom of the video transmitter. I'll have to pull it out to do this. And then I'm going to hot glue it in. So I'll do that. And then we'll come back, and I guess the only thing left after that is to give it a test flight. Okay, so we are almost done. The other things that I've done, which have been off camera while I've been testing this, is I've zip tied down the battery leads at the back. There were some little holes on the inside, so I've used those. That'll give it a bit of stress relief on the board, which is always good. I have obviously hot glued the antenna in, like I said I was going to. I've also taped down the receiver wires, just with another bit of tape around the arms. So the board itself, they comes out both ways. I've taped one so that it points up this way, so this one here so it points up that way. This one loops around there and points out that way. This gives them a 90-degree offset, do it that way, which means that regardless of the quad orientation, I'm always going to get a fairly good signal. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Although the other thing that I forgot to do was actually set the flight controller up for reversed motors. If I'd forgotten to do that, it would have just flipped out as soon as I turned it on. So that's a command line. I've done that in the video of me reversing the motors anyway. Just obviously forgot to do that while I was setting up the flight controller before. So like I said, I've tested the Lua script on my radio, and it is now working. I can change the video channel through my radio. I can also change all of my PID settings, which is great, which means I don't really need to worry about setting them up or even putting some sort of vaguely good PID settings in. The defaults will be perfectly fine. The rates that I added before were not my normal rates. They were close, but not the ones I normally fly with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to find my radio.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Okay, I found my radio. I'm just going to give it one last power up on the bench, just to make sure that everything's good. Yep, no black smoke. I'm just going to give it an arm. You can see the motors are going. And they're reacting when I put the sticks in. We'll just disarm it there. And that's it. So what I'm going to do now is put some props on and take it outside for a quick little hover test, and that'll probably be the end of this video, because it's getting quite late this weekend. I don't think I've got time to actually give it a proper fly. So yeah, I'll do that now. Okay, so this is where I normally test fly my quads. It's really hot today, so I'm standing in my garage. I've got the OSD recording on my goggles, and yeah, I guess this is the moment of truth. So I'm just going to arm it and hover for a little bit, and if it hovers, then we'll consider that good. And go. That's better. Alright, I've got no idea why it did that. I'm going to have to investigate why it didn't arm there. But yeah, you can see now it's arming. So I'll just throttle it up. And she takes off. Testing. Try not to fly out of shot. Fly that badly. Alright, so that's it for this video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you've seen the first one and you like that, give that one a thumbs up too. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you want to leave any comments or any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and maybe think about subscribing. Thanks.